Islam, Shalom, Assalamu alaikum, Osio, Hola, Aloha. This is your brother Zach Bay, Indigenous American Moor, coming to you live and in full effect. Thank you for joining me. Please like, share, subscribe. I do not own the rights to the music that's playing. All rights reserved. But the information that I'm about to give to you is mainly my opinion, but a lot of it can be verified through plenty of different sources, scientific sources, historical sources, government records, things like that. So I want to title this video "The COV Wars, COV Wars." All right, let's jump into it. I just want to start off with a question. Are they really warring against me and you, against us? Are they? Are they warring against us? The COV Wars. All right, so just keep that question in mind. Are they really warring against us? All right, family units, society, healthcare workers, and in general, healthcare, small business owners, the entire public domain. Now, this year we've been through a lot. We've seen a whole lot of mandates. We've seen a whole lot of psychological warfare, scare tactics. We've dealt with a lot of that throughout this whole year. Pretty much like forced compliance, or like highly subjective, highly suggestive natures and motives through all different types of avenues and media. You have to think about what was happening in the school systems, how a lot of people couldn't go to school to receive certain things. A lot of people couldn't go to their work, couldn't go to their jobs without receiving certain things under these mandates, under these suggestions. Don't forget, it's just a suggestion. They're giving you, it's almost forced compliance. It's like either you take this or you do this, or you won't be able to do this and that. You know, it's almost like a threat. Coercion. You know, that's what it is. Coercion. We've seen different careers stand up and try to fight against these things. We witnessed the U.S. military, armed forces, Marines bringing up cases in the Supreme Court on rights being violated, the Constitution being violated. We've seen police unions, policy enforcers, their unions have been standing with them on this forced compliance, this coercion. You know, either you do this or take this, or you're not going to be able to perform your duties or your job. Now, we have to think about, where is all this heading? Where is all this going? You know, as a whole, as a society, not just our society, I mean worldwide, not just us Moors, not just Albions, not just all these other different types of people, not just our nationality specifically. I'm talking about all over the world. This has been happening. If you've been paying attention to international news, you've seen plenty of countries stand up over in the UK, Australia, France, over in Paris. If you're watching international news, you can see how many people are taking to the streets, standing up for their rights, standing up for the freedoms that we're all guaranteed as human beings on this planet. standing up against these so-called governments that want to control the masses with an iron fist. Just to go over a few of the freedoms, I have this part labeled cans and cannots, rights or freedoms versus privileges. We all know what certain rights we have, unalienable rights, certain freedoms that are guaranteed and protected under our Constitution specifically, and against privileges, which are like grants, things that you should be able to do under certain guides, under certain licenses, under certain permissions. You have to receive certain permissions for privileges, because privileges can be granted and then privileges can be taken away if you don't comply. So how are you operating? That's the question I want to ask. How are you operating? Are you using your God-given discernment to really see how these narratives are being pushed through the media, through certain public officials, through the governments all over the world? Certain false propaganda is being pushed, certain other voices being silenced, voices of dissent, people who just want to ask questions and raise the awareness of the general populace. These people are being silenced. Alternative medicines are being shunned. Natural remedies are being shunned. A lot of naturopathic doctors have been just dropping off the face of the earth, have been being eliminated for even daring to speak up and speak out against this form of tyranny. So what are we gonna do? The masses, the public, the free. What are we gonna do with our freedom? What can we do? What are the rights that are guaranteed to us? What is potentially being taken away little by little? It's not just one huge power grab. They're not really trying to force everyone to stay inside their homes like in other nations all over the world, because these people don't have the right to bear arms constitutionally. I believe that's a big deterror for them. Otherwise, it may have already happened through sort of forced compliances. And if these police unions, these policy enforcers aren't being forced to take this because a lot of them said that they won't return to work, who is going to enforce this on the general public? Then they will be forced to use military powers. Over 90, I believe over 95 or 90% of the U.S. armed forces have already received this. Just a small percent are standing up for their constitutionally protected rights, their human rights, universally under the Almighty Creator, under Allah, under God, to hold fast to their beliefs. And they're not being listened to, they're being silenced, they're being threatened. These people who are sworn to protect us, to protect this nation, they're being silenced. People who have taken the Hippocratic Oath in the health departments, in the health sector, swearing to do no harm, they're being silenced. Their hands are being forced, they're being coerced. Where's all this leading? A few of the things that are rights that we have. The freedom to right to assembly, that's being threatened. You can't go into certain public spaces. They're discouraging people from meeting with their family, their loved ones. They're discouraging people from bonding together and uniting, using fear tactics, coercion, psychological warfare. And if you don't have that, what's the alternative? What's the alternative if you do not have the right to assemble. A bunch of solitary individuals, a bunch of single family units forced to defend for themselves without the help of a community, of a larger body, a larger whole for all of us, multiple families to stand together, towns, cities, entire states. We have a few states that are dissenting from the forced narrative and trying to save their economies, because we have to remember, all the states, they signed an agreement to be a part of the union. To be a part of the union, we have to remember that. And those contracts, who knows whether or not they can be voided, whether or not they can be rescinded, to go back to the de jure republic of each state having its own government and doing its own thing. How long will it take? These are just questions I want to ask you. I want you to think about these. I want you to think about these questions and go look for answers for yourself. Because like I said, these are just my opinions. Disclaimer, I'm not sure if this video will be banned or flagged. But I just want you to think about these things. Another freedom that's being threatened, the freedom of religion, religious freedoms, constitutionally protected, is being threatened. What were some of the first things they did? Close down the mosques, the temples, the churches. That's part of the assembly. They don't want people to congregate together, join together. If you can't practice your faith with your tribe, with your family, your extended family, with other brothers in the faith, other brothers and sisters in the faith, if you can't do that, you're isolated, easier to control when you're alone. You have to remember that. What's the alternative? If they're closing the churches, the temples, the mosques, the synagogues, and you cannot join together, if you're afraid to leave your homes from fears of contaminating or potentially infecting your loved ones, what's the alternative? Isolation. Another freedom of self-determination, protected under the universal human rights. Self-determination and the rights of the universal rights for indigenous people. Self-determination. You determine for yourself your own identity, your own nationality, what's good for you, your tribe, your family, your loved ones, your brothers and sisters, your children, the elders. You decide. Self-determination. That's being threatened. Governments and body politics all over the world are saying they know what's best for you. They're saying they know what's best for everyone. What's the alternative? If you're alone, if you can't decide and you can't determine for yourself, who are you giving that power to? Who are you surrendering that power to? Who are you submitting to if you can't determine for yourself? Freedom of the press is the next one. That's a huge one. That's a occupation that's actually mentioned in the Constitution. Freedom of the press. Noble. That's a noble occupation, to disseminate information to the people. And those avenues are being controlled. And they're painting the narrative through news, through the social media, the radio, the broadcasting. Who has control? What narrative are they painting into what ends? What can you do about it if all that you're blasted with is false narratives, propaganda, fear tactics, psychological warfare? Who has control? Will you be able to defend yourself mentally, spiritually, physically from a constant bombardment of false narratives? People who believe in the propagandas, those who believe in those propagandas, where will you turn if you can't turn to your family, your friends, your neighbors, your sisters, your brothers, if you're isolated? If you can't bond together, if you can't band together, if you cannot unite? Ask yourself these questions. Think about it. Really think about it. The freedom of speech. The way the censors go up on all these social media sites. The way you cannot use certain buzzwords. The way certain code words are being used and thrown around. Compliance. Infusions, mandates, compulsory orders. Who's really in control if you can't speak your piece? If you cannot speak the truth? If you cannot speak the truth, what else is left? Lies, falsehoods. If you cannot speak with honor, you can only speak in dishonor. What's left? What's the alternative? If you cannot speak, if you are silenced behind a mask, how will you speak? Who will listen? Is another question. Who will listen, really? Who will have the eyes to see? Who will have the ears to hear? Very concerning. Very concerning indeed. You can't even write certain words on certain social media sites because you'll be flagged. Your account will be banned. You will be silenced. That's the underline of it. You will be silenced. If you don't say what we want you to say, if you don't speak the words that we want you to speak, you will be silenced. By force, if necessary. Those are just some of the freedoms that we constantly have to keep in mind. Those are the rights that we constantly have to fight for and know that they're ours. And they cannot be taken away. They can be surrendered. But will you surrender them? Will you? I want to go into another section about things that you cannot do, cannot, once you have received this thing, once you have been subjected to this mandate or this compulsory action. They're compelling you. They're damn near forcing you. Things you cannot do, just simple things. Or are they so simple? The United States and the world is at a shortage, has a shortage of viable blood samples. transplants for people in need. Now, once you have received this, maybe you've heard on commercials how they might say at the very end, ask your doctor if you have received. You cannot donate blood plasma. You can't. If you receive that, you cannot donate plasma. So if you can't donate plasma, how will you get plasma if you need it? How will you get blood if you need it? If you have received that. If you have been subjected to that. You cannot reverse this injection, this infusion, my word. You cannot reverse it. Once received, you can't go back. There's no going back. You're in the end game. And you have to receive booster after booster after booster. It destroys your natural immunity. It destroys the immunity that you would have naturally to fight off this, to fight off that, to fight off all different things, variants. It destroys it. Therefore, you have to keep going back. Who's making money off of this? When you follow the money, it mostly only leads one place. When you follow the money, you start to see where it's headed to. You start to see whose pockets are being filled and whose pockets are being emptied. If you follow the money, you follow that trail, that paper trail. Ask yourself these questions. Another thing that you cannot donate that most people may not know about, that I've heard a little bit about, you barely ever hear it in the media. You have to go look for these answers for yourself, which is always better. You cannot donate semen. That might sound funny, but there seems to be a premium on unjabbed semen at this moment, at this time. One of the basic things that can be produced by the male variety, you can't donate it. Just like plasma, just like blood plasma. Organs. I heard a story and I was listening to the testimony of a woman who was in line for an organ transplant. She did not want to receive this. The hospital told her that if she does not receive it, and her donor, who also did not want to receive it, if both of them don't receive it, they will not be able to perform the procedure. This woman was waiting for a kidney transplant, I believe. So if you don't get that kidney, that's pretty much a death sentence. So they were forcefully and compelled to receive this in order for them to be able to go underneath and do that procedure to potentially save a life. Now you can look this up for yourself. Just a few key words. You can find the story for yourself. That testimony. Now, if it's from donor to recipient, and both have been dosed with this infusion, this injection, apparently there's no problem. The hospital doesn't have any problem doing those procedures. But who knows what kind of reaction these people will get from said injection or infusion individually, and then crossing those into one vessel. What type of adverse reactions, what type of effects it could potentially have. Who knows? Because this is all experimental. You have to remember, it was all put into an effect by a so-called an emergency mandate, the warp speed. Operation Warp Speed, Project Warp Speed, compulsory, untested. You have to remember these things. You have to question these things. You know, eyes to see, ears to hear. You need a mind to think. Think about these things. Question. Another story I heard, testimonial. A woman who had a baby. I believe the baby was either 2 months old already, and she received the injection on fusion. She was breastfeeding her child before just fine. The baby was healthy. The baby was healthy. So the lady received this injection, this infusion, thinking that she is protecting her family, protecting herself. She goes back and begins to nurture her child, breastfeed her child. The baby did not last long. The baby expired because of this injection, this infusion that the mother had taken only days before. Transmitting of bodily fluids from one vessel to another. One injected and subjected to, and the other clean, pure. Did not survive, unfortunately. You know, that is a sad story. I'm pretty sure there's many, many more of these stories that are out there that are just not put into the public. You have to look for them. You might hear about it 1 second, and the next thing you know, it will be buried. It'll be hard to find a story online. It'll be hard to find the testimonials. But you have to look for it. When these things happen, pay attention. It might be called paying attention, but you don't have to pay anything. But your time, your mind, pay attention to it. Eyes to see, ears to hear. Just pay attention. Continue along here. Now, that was the section on the things that you cannot do, the things you can and cannot do, rights versus freedoms. Rights and freedoms versus privileges. I want to continue on to another part I wrote down. So, this is just a statement. Humans are over 98% the same. We're basically interchangeable. Think about that. All of us humans are over 90%, 98% the same. You can take one organ from another, put it into someone else, it'll work just fine. You know, mostly all the chemistry, all the biology inside of us are pretty much the same, besides types of blood. Negative blood, positive blood, AB blood, A blood, O blood, RH. We're mostly the same. 98% interchangeable. So just keep in mind, we are all more alike than we are different. All of us. And it's less than 1% that determines the hue in a person's pigment, in a person's skin tone. The hue is less than 1%. That's barely a difference at all. If you can even call that a difference. It's insignificant when you look at it from a scientific perspective. on some mutations in the human genome and the variants in the human variety. So mutations vary and can be passed through reproduction via dominant genes and recessive genes. Now those are mutations. Mutations can be adaptations, just to adapt to something, or they can be at a detriment, as certain disorders. That's what I mean. This is basic biology. Basic. Once you get more in depth, you start to get to more complexities, but I'm trying to simplify it. This is just basic, bare minimum that most people, that most laymen can determine, that you can understand, overstand. Now remember, mutations can be passed down through reproduction. They can be adaptations, adapting, or they can be detriments, deformities. All right? Positive and recessive genes, positive or negative blood types, disorders, ailments, hair textures, iris color, and hue of skin. These are very basic, elementary things. And most of them fall into that very, very tiny percentile. The variations of how we look, of what you can see, skin deep, what you can see, and even what you can feel. But on the inside, we're 98% the same. All that falls into that small percentile of differences. So where I'm going with this is, I'm just going to go to the animal kingdom here, and then I'm going to loop it back around into us humans. Okay, we're mostly familiar with the XX chromosome, which makes female, and the XY chromosomes, which makes male. Okay, this might surprise you. You might know, you might not. But the ants in a colony, they're all female. From the queen all the way down, the queen all the way down to the worker drone, female. But yet, there's a specific time where a female lays eggs, and they're male eggs, and those male ants will have wings to travel to other colonies and mate with the queens of other colonies and reproduce and impregnate the queen to make her fertile for her entire lifetime, so she can continue to produce and build colonies. She also does the same thing with queens. She lays a very special variety of egg that ends up being queens to make other colonies. The same thing can be said about bees. In an entire colony of bees, they're all females, from the queen all the way down to the drone, except that certain mutation when she starts to create the variety of male bees, which are meant to fly to other colonies and impregnate other queens so she can produce other bees for her entire lifetime. Now, I'm going to loop that around to humans. In the womb, when we are conceived, all humans are XX chromosomes. They're all female. And then a change happens, or mutation, and that other X chromosome turns into a Y chromosome, which makes us male, which can be seen as a adaptation, or it can be looked at as you get where I'm going with this? It can be looked at as a defect in some way, shape, or form. Because although we gain certain things, we also lose something. It's like an equivalent exchange. We gain in physical prowess, strength, other abilities, quickness, reflexes, greater bone density, things of that nature. But we lose certain things that the female has, certain insights, intuition, the ability to carry children. You get what I'm saying? A very, very tiny difference, a very, very minute mutation, which makes an entire different variety. Now, break it down, or editing the human genome at such a fundamental level can have a dire effect. Our entire generation, our entire population, a dire effect. So what exactly are we doing here? What exactly is happening? I want to pose the question. Does this have something to do with the transhumanism agenda and patenting the modified organisms created from such an experiment? Does it? Does this have something to do with that? Does this mad dash, this rush, this warp speed, this coercion have something to do with that agenda? Does it? I want you to think for yourself. I want you to go look for these answers for yourself. I have my own opinions. I've done my own research. I've drawn my own conclusions. I've done critical thinking. Not to say that I know everything, because I don't. I can never know everything. Most of us can never know everything. It takes a lifetime. And even in a lifetime, you'll never know everything. But I'm posing to you that question. Does it? Does it have something to do with that agenda? Once again, this is your brother, Zach Bay, Indigenous American Moor, coming to you live and in full effect. I'd like to thank you for joining me. Please like, share, subscribe this video. Comment on it. Give me suggestions. Peace.